UFC fighters have been known to lose up to 7% of their body weight in just 72 hours, then gain back nearly 10% before fight night. In this video, we're going to break down the brutal methods fighters use to cut weight, the rules they must obey, and the science behind the process. For UFC fighters, the first opponent they face isn't across the cage, it's the scale. Meeting the official weight limit is non-negotiable, and the consequences for failure can be steep. To compete, athletes must weigh in at or under their class limit the day before the fight. Fighters missing weight can often surrender a large percentage of their purse and forfeit eligibility for performance bonuses. In some cases, the fight itself can be scrapped if the weight difference poses risks to safety. The penalties aren't just financial. Failing to make weight can cost fighters title opportunities and damage their credibility with promoters and fans. At UFC 274, Charles Oliveira weighed in half a pound over the lightweight title limit. As a result, he was stripped of the championship on the scale, even though he went on to defeat Justin Gaethje the next night. That single missed half pound erased his status as champion, underscoring how unforgiving the system can be. Then there's Johnny Hendricks, once a UFC champion, who missed weight multiple times. His repeated failures chipped away at his career momentum, leaving him to fight outside the spotlight he once occupied. To avoid this, many fighters pushed themselves to levels most people wouldn't be able to endure. An example occurred when Renan Barão, once a bantamweight champion, collapsed trying to make weight for UFC 177. This not only forced him out of the fight, but also marked the start of a steep decline in his career trajectory. Cutting large amounts of weight in the days before a fight means athletes walk into weigh-ins severely dehydrated and physically depleted. Some fighters weigh up to 15 to 20 pounds heavier than their division limit in daily life, dropping extreme amounts in the final stretch. Daniel Cormier, for example, trimmed to 205 pounds for light heavyweight, while his natural weight was closer to 240. That kind of drop comes from nearly all water manipulation, which places intense strain on the body. So how do fighters actually shed so much weight in such a short period of time? The methods go far beyond dieting and step into the territory of hydration science, where water, salt, and glycogen are manipulated to force the body into sudden, extreme changes. Understanding those details is the key to understanding what happens in the final days before a fight. The science behind cutting weight is built around manipulating the body's water balance. To accomplish this, fighters target the water stored in tissues, muscles, and even the digestive system to shed pounds quickly before weigh-ins. Studies on UFC fighters show that athletes lose, on average, 6.7% of their body weight in the 72 hours leading up to weigh-ins, then regain 9.7% between the weigh-in and fight night. For many, the process starts nearly a week out. Camps use a phased, water-loading and sodium-restricting approach to get the body into flush mode. Fighters ignite this by drinking unusually large amounts of water while sharply cutting salt from their diet. Sodium is responsible for fluid retention. When it's removed and the body is overloaded with water, the kidneys ramp up fluid excretion. When water intake is cut off, the body continues flushing at that elevated rate. It's a deliberate trick designed to make the system dump far more liquid than it's taking in. At around 3 days out, nutrition becomes just as important. Fighters restrict carbohydrates almost entirely. Scientifically, the reasoning is clear. Carbohydrates are stored in the muscles and liver as glycogen, and every gram of glycogen binds with about 2.7 grams of water. When athletes cut carbs, they deplete glycogen stores, and with each gram burned off, several grams of water are released. This accelerates weight loss, but comes at a significant cost as glycogen is a critical energy source. Fighters are left with low energy reserves, leaving them fatigued before they begin the most demanding stages of the cut. The last 2 days before weigh-ins are where the challenge intensifies. By this point, water intake has been cut off and the flushing habits force the body to continue discarding fluid. On top of that, athletes also use external methods to lose water through sweat. Heated saunas, salt baths, and sweatsuits are common. None of these are recommended by sports science professionals because of the health risks, but they remain practiced widely because of the sheer pressure to make weight. What makes the stage dangerous is the loss of electrolytes. Sodium and potassium are critical for muscle function and mental sharpness, yet both are drained during aggressive sweating. Symptoms like dizziness, cramping, and confusion can arise quickly, and if unchecked, severe dehydration can threaten kidney function and cardiovascular stability. At its worst, blood volume drops so low that the heart struggles to circulate enough oxygen, leading to blackouts or hospitalization. These risks help explain why failures in the final stages of a cut have derailed major fights. Throughout this process, fighters lean heavily on their teams to monitor them. To make matters worse, as bodies adapt to these intense methods, the metabolism slows, and recovering from lingering injuries can make the process less predictable over time. No one can rely on the same exact routine before each fight without complications. The physical and mental toll of this process is barbaric. Fighters describe unbearable dry mouth, skin that feels tight from lack of fluid, constant and intense muscle cramps, and exhaustion from functioning with minimal nutrition. Some admit that even lying down can be difficult because the body is depleted of all nutrients. The process plays out like a draining battle just to stay conscious while the body runs on empty. The final 24 hours leading up to weigh-ins represent the most punishing and dangerous stretch of the entire process. By this point, fighters have spent days reducing carbohydrates, cutting sodium, and manipulating water intake. What remains is a drastic push to shed the few pounds still clinging to their frames. This is when fighters turn to sweat-based tactics, saunas, sweatsuits, and scalding hot baths, forcing their bodies to expel every remaining drop of water. Inside the sauna, fighters bundle themselves in layers of plastic suits, sweatpants, and hoodies. The stifling heat forces relentless sweating until they are drenched, weak, and often disoriented. Many describe the sensation as their muscles cramping uncontrollably while pounding headaches flare from dehydration. Resting between sessions offers little reprieve, as any fluids lost can't yet be replaced. This process repeats until the target weight is in sight. Some fighters prefer sweatsuits for mobility, jogging, or shadowboxing in layers of clothing designed to trap heat and restrict evaporation. Others pair these with hot baths. The bath method is especially grueling. Fighters submerge themselves in near scalding water, then immediately wrap up in towels or plastic and lie under thick blankets to continue sweating. After 15 or 20 minutes, the cycle starts again. Each round leaves them lighter but weaker. Chael Sonnen once spoke about sitting in a sauna for so long that his hands and feet went numb. Dizziness overwhelmed him, and he felt his balance slipping away. By the end, he said, it felt like his mind was drifting in and out as if his body and thoughts were separating under the strain. For him, getting through that final night wasn't about discipline. It was about sheer survival. His story mirrors what countless fighters endure, though most never describe it as openly. During this final stretch, studies show fighters can lose about 4 to 5% of their body weight in water, often the single largest portion of their total cut. For a 155-pound lightweight, that's nearly 7 pounds in one day. To put this in perspective, the average person begins to feel severely fatigued after losing just 2% of their body's water through dehydration. Fighters push twice that amount, sometimes more. Straining circulation as thicker blood forces the heart to work harder, while muscles and organs are robbed of the fluids they need to function properly. This explains why lightheadedness and fainting are so common during these final hours. The health consequences can sometimes spiral into medical emergencies. The most infamous example came in 2017, when Khabib Nurmagomedov experienced serious complications while preparing for UFC 209. With only hours to go, his body shut down from dehydration. He was hospitalized, and his fight against Tony Ferguson, one of the most anticipated bouts in UFC history, was canceled. Even for fighters who avoid collapse, the mental strain is severe. Many fighters claim the psychological fight here is tougher than what awaits inside the octagon. After enduring the most miserable 24 hours of their training camp, fighters finally take the official scales. This moment is not celebrated with joy, but met with cautious relief. The number staring back determines everything. If they make weight, the suffering has purpose. If not, weeks of sacrifice unravel in an instant. But making weight doesn't mean the job is finished. Fighters now have just over a day to restore the fluids, electrolytes, and energy reserves they've drained away. Their ability to recover dictates not only how they'll perform, but whether they'll even feel stable enough to compete. The next phase is all about turning a depleted, dehydrated body back into a fight-ready machine. Hours after weigh-ins, fighters enter a highly structured phase, reversing dehydration and rebuilding strength for fight night. Every sip and bite is carefully chosen to restore balance without overwhelming the body. Research shows fighters typically regain 9 to 10% of their body weight within 24 to 36 hours of weigh-in, meaning a 155-pound lightweight can rehydrate to about 170 pounds. This rapid weight gain reflects water, glycogen, and electrolytes returning to normal levels. Professionals who manage this process well tend to follow a staged, deliberate approach. The order is as important as the content itself. They start by sipping low-sugar electrolyte solutions to restore sodium, potassium, and minerals lost during dehydration. This careful introduction avoids stressing the stomach while helping the body retain fluid. Next comes the gradual introduction of easily digestible carbohydrates, rice, oats, or potatoes, to refill glycogen stores in the muscles and liver. These carbs carry water into cells, amplifying hydration while restoring energy. Then fighters move to larger meals that include lean proteins, carbohydrate-rich foods like sweet potatoes or rice, and extra sodium added to meals. That sodium helps the body retain water rather than flushing it out, locking fluid back into tissues. Some teams start with diluted mixes and transition to higher sugar formulations once the stomach can absorb fuel again. This keeps absorption smooth while rebuilding energy systems as quickly as possible. When done with precision, the body begins to look and perform drastically better within half a day. In the past, many fighters relied on intravenous IV rehydration to rapidly replace fluids and electrolytes. However, athletic commissions have restricted the use of IVs. While this was intended to prevent misuse and to maintain fairness, it also pushes fighters to rely on oral strategies. It makes the staged reintroduction of fluids and nutrients more important than ever, since they can no longer skip the body's natural absorption process. Replenishing sodium and potassium is critical in this phase. Without careful replacement, fighters risk cramps, weakness, or even dangerous heart rhythm problems. Potassium-rich foods like bananas and potatoes are standard choices during this time. Adding extra salt to meals also helps retain water, preventing the newly consumed liquids from passing through the body. The correct balance of these minerals is one of the most important factors of a successful rebound. Performance restoration is where the value of this process becomes most visible. Chael Sonnen once measured his athletic output before and after a weight cut. Following his cut, his vertical jump, treadmill performance, and strength endurance had all plummeted. Within a day of rehydrating and refueling, much of that lost ability returned. His experience shows that while the cut leaves athletes on the brink of collapse, recovery can be swift and surprisingly complete when done strategically. Meal timing is carefully managed to avoid digestive strain while maximizing fuel. Many will eat their largest meal shortly after weighing in, then taper portions as fight night approaches. About 5 hours before the walkout, fighters usually finish their final meal, relying on smaller, high-carb, low-fiber snacks afterward. This ensures food is digested and energy is readily available, while preventing a heavy stomach from slowing them down mid-fight. Nutritionists and performance specialists often guide these decisions, helping fighters avoid mistakes that could backfire. Dustin Poirier has spoken about how critical it is to work with professionals who tailor his exact recovery plan. Even with all the science and structure, the rebound process isn't guaranteed. Rehydrating too fast can cause stomach cramping, bloating, or a dangerous drop in electrolytes from overhydration. Going too slow risks stepping into the cage without full energy reserves. The line is razor thin, and one wrong choice can leave a fighter depleted rather than recovered. The contrast in appearance between weigh-in and fight night is extraordinary. The sunken faces and frail physiques seen on the scale quickly give way to full, energized athletes who look ready to perform. For fighters who master the recovery process, it can carry both physical and psychological benefits. Yet these transformations often hide a harder truth. Regaining weight and fluid so quickly doesn't erase the damage of the cut. Many athletes step into the cage with bodies that are still fatigued and organs that are not fully restored. While the rebound rebuilds enough to compete, it doesn't fully restore what the depletion has taken away. This careful balancing act shows how pivotal rehydration is to the fight game. And while fans see the revitalized athlete in the octagon, few realize the hidden costs that remain long after the fluids are replaced. The reality of weight cutting is there are consequences that extend far beyond performance on fight night. Medical experts warn that extreme weight cuts compromise nearly every system in the body. Severe dehydration puts heavy strain on the kidneys, which must filter toxins with sharply reduced fluid levels. Fighters who repeat this cycle multiple times a year risk long-term kidney injury and even acute kidney failure. When fluids are stripped away, blood thickens and circulates less efficiently, forcing the heart to work harder. This increases the risk of heart problems, including arrhythmia and, in rare cases, cardiac arrest. Muscle tissue can also break down under extreme stress, leading to a condition called rhabdomyolysis, where muscle fibers release toxins into the bloodstream that further damage the kidneys. Electrolyte imbalances add another layer of danger. Potassium, calcium, and sodium are essential to nerve signaling and muscle contractions. In severe cases, imbalances may cause seizures or irregular heart rhythms. The brain is especially vulnerable during this process. Normally, cerebrospinal fluid cushions the brain inside the skull. When dehydration reduces that protective layer, fighters are more exposed to concussions or traumatic brain injury once contact begins in the octagon. The hours spent severely depleted can leave lingering effects, increasing the risk of longer-term neurological issues. Entering a bout under those conditions is stepping into danger with less protection than athletes in other sports would ever allow. Some fighters have spoken out about what this feels like in real time. Michael Chiesa described his cut for UFC 226 as a moment where he thought he might actually die, while Brian Ortega once lost consciousness for half an hour during a weight cut. In extreme cases, fatalities are also on the table. In 2015, one championship fighter, Yang Jianbing, passed away during a severe weight cut, his body succumbing to cardiopulmonary failure brought on by dehydration. Another tragedy struck Muay Thai fighter Jordan Ko, who died while running in heavy gear to sweat off pounds. Both cases illustrate that even world-class athletes are not immune to the most extreme consequences of the practice, and that crossing the body's limits is far easier than fans may realize. Long-term effects are becoming a greater concern as more fighters speak about lingering health issues. Research has linked repeated dehydration and weight cycling to chronic kidney strain, disrupted hormone regulation, and cardiovascular stress. Balancing fairness with the well-being of athletes is becoming a pressing topic, forcing the UFC to confront whether maintaining the tradition in its current form is sustainable or if different approaches are needed to protect fighters. Proposals range from adopting stricter oversight to completely abandoning traditional cutting practices. While no consensus exists, the discussion has produced some research-backed alternatives that could reshape the sport going forward. One of the most studied and implemented systems comes from One Championship, which introduced hydration testing as a response to repeated tragedies. Instead of relying solely on a weigh-in, fighters must prove they are hydrated by passing urine testing. If the test reveals signs of dehydration, the fighter cannot weigh in, restricting the practice of dangerous last-minute fluid shedding. This approach forces athletes to compete closer to their natural weight. The drawback, however, is scale. One operates with fewer fights than the UFC. Replicating this across the UFC would require enormous resources and standardized enforcement across athletic commissions. Another example comes from the California State Athletic Commission, which introduced new weight-cutting rules in 2017. Their approach involved monitoring fighters after weigh-ins. If an athlete's post-weigh-in weight was more than 10% above their division limit, they were flagged and required to move up a weight class in future bouts. While this has shown promise in reducing dangerous fluctuations, its reach is limited. Another recurring idea is the addition of new weight divisions. The current structure leaves wide gaps between classes, particularly at higher weights. For example, the cutoff between light heavyweight, 205 pounds, and heavyweight, 265 pounds, is massive. Smaller heavyweights can find themselves at a severe size disadvantage, creating pressure to dehydrate drastically to avoid fighting much larger opponents. Narrowing these gaps reduces the incentive for dramatic cuts, since fighters have more options to compete closer to their natural weight. On the other hand, more divisions create complications. Each class requires its own rankings and championship belts, potentially diluting the prestige of titles, complicating matchmaking, and fragmenting divisions. Even with these options on the table, reform also faces cultural resistance. Weight cutting is deeply ingrained in MMA's identity. Fighters often view it as both a physical and mental test to prepare for the hardships of combat. To many, mastering the cut is part of being a professional. Some fighters fear losing a competitive edge if forced to adjust. There are also logistical pressures. Hydration testing requires labs and equipment. Tracking weight regain requires detailed monitoring. And new divisions require restructuring promotional systems. Reform is not impossible, but it carries layers of challenges. Still, critics argue that no matter how many measures are introduced, fighters will always try to manipulate the system. Whether through disguising hydration levels, temporarily altering fluid intake before tests, or devising new cutting strategies, athletes consistently innovate around regulation. Experts suggest that as long as weight cutting exists, it will remain inherently unsafe. The only true fix, they say, is to abandon cuts altogether and require fighters to compete near their natural weight. The path forward will depend heavily on the UFC's willingness to take action. Fighters, fans, and governing bodies all watch to see if reform will come through tweaks or through sweeping overhaul. Weight cutting remains one of the toughest realities in MMA, demanding discipline but carrying undeniable risks. This ritual may offer short-term competitive advantages, but the documented medical risks leave the sport at a crossroads. Should the UFC consider adding more weight classes or enforcing hydration testing? Drop your vote in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you like what you saw, hit us with a like and subscribe, and join us as we unpack more across the world of the UFC.